Hello, my random viewers, and welcome to Randomly Offensive. Today we will be continuing the story of Ling Xiaoyu, and I will be skipping the recap and jumping right into the story. So if you have not seen the previous videos, they will be linked at the tippity-toppity top of the video right here, right now. If you want to clickety on them and watch them, they'll be up there in chronological order, so you can see the ones you have not seen and not see the ones you have already seen, unless you want to see those ones. You do you. So with that being said, let's hop into the story of Ling Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu has finally made it to Li's mansion, where her panda is being held hostage by the new Li. And standing at the front door, Xiaoyu cannot get her legs to stop shaking. She cannot get herself to stop sweating. She cannot stop feeling the fear that comes from imagining the worst of the worst, trying to get out of her head and trying to build up the strength to enter the door, because she knows the second her foot enters the door, her fears will then be confirmed and there will be no returning from that. So Xiaoyu reaches into her pocket and pulls out the chip that she has been demanded to return to Li, and she forces herself with shaky hands to open the doors. And as she walks into the mansion, she walks through the hallway to the main room where she once found the original Li dead on the couch, and the memories shoot back, her trying to figure out what happened that night and who this replacement actually is. And as she walks in, she sees Li sitting comfortably on a chair at the corner of the couch on the end of the coffee table. As he comfortably sits with his legs crossed, sipping on a cocktail, he looks at her. "Ah, Xiaoyu, I see you brought the chip. Hand it here, and I will show you Panda." And Xiaoyu looks at him, and he sees her eyes turning red, and she is debating whether or not to allow herself to lose control or to stay focused. And she looks at Li. "How about you show me Panda first," she says. And Li gives her a smile. "All right, sure." "Oh, Panda," says Li as he yells towards the door. "Game's over, come say hi to Xiaoyu." And so Panda then walks out of the door with both ears fully attached, non-harmed, and as happy as can be as he's eating out of a jumbo-sized bag of gummy bears, happily snacking on these gummy bears as he sees Xiaoyu and gives her a happy wave with his paw going up and down. And Xiaoyu runs to Panda and gives him a giant hug and puts the hat on Panda, and then snatches the bag of gummy bears away from Panda. As Panda whines, reaching for the bag, she extends her arms out, keeping it away from him. "You're not supposed to eat this much sugar," she says. And then she looks at Li. "Where did you get the ear from?" she says. "What was up with the threat? What was up with you trying to kill us?" And Li, continuously sitting in his chair, sipping on his cocktail, simply gives her a smile. "I was trying to kill you. You were threatening to ruin my plan. The plan I thought was the only plan. However, the original Li had a much better plan. But I do need that chip back," he says. And so she throws him the chip. "You have a lot of explaining to do, Mr. Li." she says almost mockingly, and Lee, catching the chip in the air, continuously sitting down with his legs crossed, just keeps smiling at Xiaoyu. Well, if you want me to explain the deal with Panda, I simply just told him we were gonna play a game. Animals are super easy to manipulate, and we staged the whole thing. I would never harm a lovely animal like Panda. I'm no monster, he says. But then he looks at her seriously. Lee and I never quite saw eye to eye. I always thought leading with Kazuha was the better way to go. Lee says as he finally starts getting up off of his chair, setting down the cocktail on the coffee table, and lights up a cigarette, a bad habit he developed because of the old Lee, and looks at Xiaoyu. When Lee first created me, I at first thought everything Lee had planned was brilliant. However, as my intellect grew, I began disagreeing with starting World War III. I began to disagree with trusting Jin Kazuma. However, Lee was convinced that World War III was inevitable, and if anyone were to start it, Jin Kazuma would be the best one to do so, because he would inflict the least amount of turmoil. However, Kazuha doesn't want World War III. All he wants is peace. Unfortunately, he says as he starts rubbing his forehead, that peace involves him ruling the world, quite similar to Heihachi's plans, he says, and now Xiaoyu is just listening, curious to see where this is going, and so Lee then holds out the chip while smoking a cigarette with his other hand. This chip is one of the most important items on this planet, because now we are going to have to merge my plan with the original Lee's plan, he says to Xiaoyu. We will continue making sure that Jin Kazuma is the victor in all of this, but we will also help out Kazuha Mishima, while ensuring that Heihachi Mishima becomes the head of the Mishima Zaibatsu, forcing this all to end with a climatic boom, says Lee, now throwing his cigarette on the ground as if he doesn't even care about the condition of his own home, and putting the chip in his pocket. Xiaoyu is starting to get annoyed that Lee isn't getting to the point, just looks at him. Okay, so what do I have to do with this? What does Panda have to do with this? Why did you not decide to kill me and Panda when you had the chance? She says, and Lee looks at Xiaoyu. Because you're gonna tell me if I'm wrong. There's a prophecy that we must stop, and I need your help. Lee was a great strategist, and he did what he did and how he did it because he knew everybody. He knew how they thought. He knew their morals and their compassions. He knew their passions. He knew their dreams, and he was able to predict how they would react. And though I inherited most of that, there are gaps in my memories, says Lee as he's now pulling his hair. And Xiaoyu just continues listening as Lee is slowly getting to the point, and Xiaoyu is starting to run out of patience. Okay, again, says Xiaoyu, what do you need me for? Why are you keeping us alive all of a sudden? She says, and Lee looks at her. Well, it's simple. When I realized that Lee made a whole new plan, when I realized the flaws in my ways, I quickly knew that you were the best way for me to fill in my gaps in my memories to form the perfect strategy. You can tell me whether or not Jin Kazuma is the chip to bet on, or if we are taking it too far. You will tell me what Jin will and will not do. You will tell me everything about Jin Kazuma, because we have to save the world. I know I've done you wrong, kid, says Lee as he walks closer to her. However, now you must understand that the old Lee and I had different plans, but the same motivations, which was to save the world from Jin Kazuma, Kazuha Mishima, Heihachi Mishima, and the Azazel. And I am tired of this world constantly being a threat, and I will be putting an end to all turmoil, says Lee. And Xiaoyu looks at him for a while before responding, thinking and wondering if Lee is telling her the truth. So she looks deep into his eyes, trying to navigate what his morals, what his endgame might be, and she puts out a hand. Well, then I will help you. And as Lee happily goes to shake her hand, she pulls it back, refusing the handshake. But you must listen to me, and we're gonna bring in the team that I say we need to bring in, says Xiaoyu. And Lee looks at Xiaoyu with a big grin on his face. I wouldn't have it any other way, little one, says Lee. And so Xiaoyu and Lee sit down and figure out who they need to get for their team. Xiaoyu sits at the table in the library that is in Lee's mansion, as Lee's consistently walking back and forth, grabbing all documents and addresses for everyone they need on the team, as Xiaoyu is shouting at him, Wong, we need Wong. I trust Wong. He trained me since I was just a little girl, and he knows the proper way to go, and if we ever go off stray, he'll guide us, she says. And so Lee yells back to her as he's grabbing all the information he can find that was collected on Wong. Alright, makes sense, Xiaoyu, he says. And then she shouts back, and that Fang guy, we need the Fang guy back. Fang is the only one that I can think of that knows more than we do. He seemed to know every detail about Lee's plan, and we need to figure out how much he actually knows. And so Lee, now grabbing all the information he can find that was collected on Fang. Alright, I got it. Lee actually had a lot of info on this guy, says Lee. And then she yells back at Lee once again, we need Paul Phoenix too, and I'm pretty sure Lee had ties with Yoshimitsu. And though Lee couldn't find anything on Paul Phoenix, he remembers an awful lot about him. And then he looks at the files of Yoshimitsu, and it is the only file that takes up an entire filing cabinet. Lee has a lot of information on this guy. I agree, we need him. And what about Julia? I saw Lee with Julia, said Xiaoyu, and Lee looks back. No, Julia's busy. We can't have Julia part of the team. She's a mole right now at the G Corporation, and that is a perfect spot for her. We gotta keep her there, says Lee. And so Xiaoyu, getting a little frustrated that Lee's not keeping to the deal, understands where Lee's coming from, and decides to trust Lee a little bit. Alright, fine, not Julia. What about Nina? She says. And Lee looks at Xiaoyu. That I actually do have a lot of that in my memories. Nina was a huge part of Lee's life, but she's also busy. I don't think that's possible. And she's working for Jin. We can't get that much involved. We gotta be the guys behind the curtain, says Lee. And Xiaoyu looks at Lee, You said, I know what I said, kid, says Lee, but there has to be stipulations. There has to be certain things that we leave to the original Lee's plan. Wouldn't you agree? Says Lee as he's now yelling across the library. And Xiaoyu nods in understandment and then looks at Lee one more time. What about King? I also saw King with Lee. And Lee looks back at Xiaoyu, knowing that King should not join the team, decides to not push his luck too far with this kid. We can try King. No guarantees on that one. I'll grab all the information I can find, though. So Lee is going through all the files on every single person. Xiaoyu shouts at him. He looks around at the entire library. This place is huge, he says to himself. Lee was kind of a stalker, wasn't he? Says Lee to Xiaoyu. Like a one-of-a-kind stalker. He has information on almost every single person ever, says Lee. And Xiaoyu looks at him. You're getting sidetracked, Lee. We're supposed to be working on the plan. And Lee looks back at her. Yeah, I get it, kid. It's just... This is amazing, says Lee. And then he sees a file of Brian Fury and looks at Brian's files. I haven't forgotten about you, Brian Fury. The day I get to take you on once again, that will be a day, he says to himself. And now, walking with a giant stack of papers and books that he is trying to balance using his chin, with his arms holding the max capacity, walks to the table and throws down everything as it fills the table. Alright, kid, I think that's everything. I think that's everybody, he says. And Xiaoyu looks at Lee. What about Anna? Can we bring Anna in? And Lee looks at Xiaoyu. Look, kid, we can't bring in every single person, and Anna scares me. I think we have enough people to do what we gotta do, says Lee. And so Xiaoyu looks at him. Alright, and are there any plans you haven't told me? And Lee looks at Xiaoyu. Well, of course there are, kid. I have plan A, B, C, D, E, all the way to frickin' Z. I can't tell you all of them, he says. And Xiaoyu slightly understands and nods her head. After Xiaoyu and Jin have studied on every single file about Wang, Feng, Yoshimitsu, Paul, and the rest, they decide to split up to go gather their team, and Xiaoyu heads off to go grab Wang. As Xiaoyu and Panda enter the forest of Wang's property, Xiaoyu rides the back of Panda, and as they go through the forest, she is remembering the times of her playing with Jin and Panda when they were just little children, as she remembers how much simpler times were. And she remembers her old ambition of someday owning an amusement park. And she's fond of the idea of her being able to have such a silly dream once again. Once all these high stakes of saving the world is over, she'd love nothing more than to fight for something as simple as an amusement park once again. Then she enters the palace of Wang, where he is training hundreds of students in the ancient ways of Kung Fu, and seeing Xiaoyu, Wang invites her in for a cup of tea, and as Xiaoyu sips on the tea, Wang looks at her. Well, what brings you here, kiddo? He says, and she looks at him. Well, how do you feel about saving the world again? She says to him, and he smiles back at her. Well, the world's always at risk, isn't it? He says, and Xiaoyu nods. Yeah, Lee and I are putting together another team. Are you in? And Wang fills her cup up with tea once again and looks at her with a wink. And so Xiaoyu knows that Wang is now part of the team. Meanwhile, Lee has set out to recruit Feng on the team. After studying everything that the original Lee had pulled together about Feng, Lee now knows why Feng was chosen for the position that he was chosen for, just like Feng had told Lee so long ago. And there stands Feng in the city center of Hong Kong, waiting patiently in line to get a loan for a new dojo now that he's done saving the world. As Feng stands there with his shoulders rolled back and his head held high with his arms crossed behind his back, he sees two masked men running into the bank, firing into the air, screaming that this is a bank robbery, and everyone hits the ground. Everyone except for Feng Wei, who continues standing where he was as if nothing's happening, with his arms folded behind his back. And one of the masked men, who holds a shotgun, walks up to Feng. "What the hell are you doing? We're robbing the place. Everyone get down," he says, now pointing the shotgun at Feng. And Feng looks at him through the corner of his eye. "No, I'm gonna stand here and apply for a loan," says Feng with no emotion in his voice or in his face or in his posture. And so the man pokes Feng in the head with the barrel of the shotgun. "I will pull this trigger if you don't get on your knees now," says the robber. However, Feng just turns around and quickly grabs the barrel of the gun, putting his index finger on the top of the barrel of the shotgun with his thumb at the bottom, and he pushes his thumb up while pulling his index finger down, and ever so gently, ever so effortlessly bends the barrel completely in half as he looks at the robber. "I already told you, I'm going to wait here and apply for a loan," says Feng. He then backhands the robber with no effort. However, the robber goes flying across the bank and slams into a wall, and the robber is knocked out. Feng, still holding that shotgun that is now bent completely in half, the other robber begins to panic. "What the hell? What the hell are you, a robot?" says the other robber. However, Feng just flings the now bent shotgun like a frisbee as it connects to the skull of the robber, knocking him out, possibly killing him. And Feng folds his hands behind his back once again and turns around to face the desk. And as he walks up past all the cowering people and the bank clerk, still shaky, he leans over. "I would like to apply for a loan for a dojo so I can teach people how to defend themselves against assholes like that," he says as he points his thumb to the two robbers. And the clerk just looks at him. "I'm pretty sure that after that footage I can convince anybody to give you anything," she says. And Feng smiles at her. "Why, thank you. It's kind of a dream of mine," he says. And so he walks out of the bank, and there's Lee, standing on one foot, leaning on the side of the bank, right next to the door, with his other foot flush against the wall. that was quite the display, Feng, says Li, and Feng turns around. You know, the original plan was supposed to have you being a dead man right now, says Feng, and Li looks at him. Yeah, I know. I was supposed to brutally hurt Panda, and then Xiaoyu was supposed to get that hidden rage thing going on and kill me while I stand. I know what the plan was, Fang, but I'm changing it. And if I can combine my plan with the original Li's plan, we could save the world. Not maybe anymore. We will save the world, says Li. As Fang looks at Li, let me guess, you want to recruit me? And Li looks at him. Well, that's up to you. Listen, Fang, says Li. I know that the plan you agreed to was gonna have Xiaoyu kill me and then later kill Kazuo, fully getting engulfed in her rage and becoming one of the most powerful martial artists this world's ever seen, being the warrior to protect the world. However, do you really want Xiaoyu to pay the price to become that person? He says, looking at Fang, and Fang looks back at him. You're hitting just the right buttons on me, Li. You read up on my files that Li had on me, didn't you? Says Fang, getting angry. Look, Fang, says Li, you can kill me right now, and everybody will be forced to carry out the original plan that Li had. But is that really the path you want Xiaoyu to take? He says, and Fang closes his eyes and takes a deep breath as he remembers a time where he was a young man that wanted nothing more than to get stronger, nothing more but power and training beneath the great master who had access to the ancient scrolls, and these scrolls allowed you to contain unhuman, godlike powers and strength. And as Fang grew older, he challenged his master to a match, and as he showed remarkable strength and incredible discipline, he killed his master and attained the scrolls. However, killing his master was the worst thing he could have ever done, and the amount of power and strength he's had has never allowed him to reconcile for the evil he had committed. And so he opens his eyes and looks at Li. Are you telling me that this is my chance at redemption? Says Fang, showing another emotion besides pride for the first time in a very long time. And Li puts a hand on the shoulder of Fang. That is exactly what I'm telling you, my friend. You can stop Xiaoyu from going down the very same path that brings you so much pain. And so Fang accepts and becomes a recruit on the team. And so Li shoots Xiaoyu a text telling her that he's got Fang and wishes her luck on the rest. Xiaoyu, meanwhile, waits for the tournament that Paul has rigged to win, for Paul to finally exit out. And when the 6th King of the Iron Fist tournament is over, Paul is walking and Xiaoyu quickly greets him. Well, congratulations on your victory, Paul, says Xiaoyu. And Paul looks at her with a smile. Yeah, even though we gotta split it with Law and Steve Fox, I'm gonna get quite a bit of dough out of this, says Paul. And then he looks at Xiaoyu. Here, real quick, that envelope for the chip, It had a letter in it, and it was for you, he says, and he gives the envelope to Xiaoyu, and Xiaoyu grabs the envelope, and she opens up the letter, and sees that it is from the original Li, and so she begins to read the letter. To my dear friend Xiaoyu, reads the letter, I am writing to you moments before my death, and I have created a replacement. However, this replacement is not going to begin with a friendly encounter, and you will be tested at every single limit that you may have. However, my original plan is not going to work, and I have decided that you and Li are already going to create a new plan, and I am trusting this world's fate in your hands. Xiaoyu continues reading the letter. Everyone who has ever met you, everyone that has been a part of your life, my dear Xiaoyu, thinks of you as nothing more than a helpless little child, as the damsel in distress that is fated and destined to be nothing more than the love interest of Jin Kazuma. But it takes no more than a fool to recognize who you really are. And that is what every child is. A promise for a better world, a promise for a better generation. What you bring to the table is nothing less than a miracle. And after watching everything about you growing up, you will always do what's right. I know that you are the only one that can protect Jin Kazuma. You're the only one that can make sure that this world continues in harmony, freedom, love, and compassion, and you will ensure that this world is not only saved, but improved upon, for you are far more capable of protecting this world than Jin, Kazuha, Heihachi, and even myself. And your need to do what's right, your need to make sure that all of those who need protection will be protected is what makes you the greatest ace I have ever come across. And so, moments before my death, I hand over the fate of this world to the greatest savior that I have ever had the privilege of meeting. And it is signed at the bottom, Love Li. Not from Li, but Love Li. And Xiaoyu hugs the letter as she thinks back on all the evils that have haunted this world. The serial killer of Brian Fury, the war that Jin has started, the turmoil that Kazuha and Heihachi has thrown the earth into. And as she thinks back of all the evils, she also thinks back on the lovable cop, Lai, the hopeful Nina, and the fun-loving Paul Phoenix, Steve Fox, Yoshimitsu, and all those who are truly good outnumber those who are truly evil. And so Xiaoyu swears to herself that she will never let her rage take over, and she will never veer away from the path of righteousness again. And as Xiaoyu returns to the mansion. She walks in to the library of Li, with Fang and Li sitting at the table. Xiaoyu walks in as the leader of Hall Phoenix, Yoshimitsu, Wong, and Panda, and as she walks, everyone takes their seats except for Li, who stands at the end of the table, and Xiaoyu walks and stands right next to Li as the leader that no one thought she'd become, as the leader that she never thought she could be. And with the encouraging words of her old friend Li, she looks at the team. "We are going to save this world," says Xiaoyu. "We are going to put an end to World War III, and we are going to make sure that everybody gets out of this alive," she says. And so now Li and Xiaoyu stand as they are ready to tell the plan that will save the world. And that is where we will have to leave this video off. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you listened for this long, thank you so much. If you really enjoyed, do hit the like and subscribe button, and take care of yourselves. Don't get hit by a meteor. Bye.